Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. And I'm asked to speak about anti-racism in the legal profession. And so I will speak about Pieters versus Law Association, which is a seminal and important case dealing with the law on anti-black racism in Ontario. I appreciate that we're in Calgary, Alberta, in the middle of Black History Month, today being February 15th, 2025. Pieters versus Law Association occurred in 2008, where two black lawyers and a law student from the University of Toronto were in the launch at the Brampton Courthouse. And there were lawyers of other ethnicities and races. There were black lawyers, which were myself and Brian Noble. There were white lawyers, there were Chinese lawyers, and there were South Asian lawyers. The only lawyers that were asked for identification and to show that they were lawyers were the black lawyers. And so we took a strong stance on that. We protested, and a human rights complaint was filed. That case was litigated at the Human Rights Tribunal, and the tribunal found that myself and Mr. Noble were discriminated against. Now, the tribunal awarded us a very small amount of cost. The tribunal awarded us $2,000 in costs. Law Association appealed that case to the divisional court, and the divisional court struck down the decision of the Human Rights Tribunal. We, Brian Noble and I, appealed that case to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal upheld or reversed the divisional court, and it affirmed the decision of the Human Rights Tribunal. In doing so, what it did is it adopted the test in Moore versus British Columbia, and that's a test for discrimination. But what it also did is it moved the dial forward. So it said that, where you're dealing with a prima facie case, it's different where the respondent calls evidence. But it says, look, we put the respondents in a situation where it has to make a tactical decision. And that tactical decision is if you call evidence, that evidence has to be credible. If you lie, if you present a false narrative, then you have some issues. And so that's certainly what we have. So it adopted a case called Snell versus Snell. So jurisdictions relied on Snell, and all that sort of stuff. So it's quite.
Oh, that's not what I wanted to.
Quite an interesting thing. So we got so Law Association is important. It's been cited. It also dealt with whether or not causal nexus is required. And it says no causal nexus is required. All that's required is a connection or a nexus. And the Supreme Court adopted that. A commission de droit de la personne et des droits de la jeunesse contre Bombardier. So the Supreme Court adopted that in Quebec versus Bombardier. And Pieters versus P Law Association is cited in decisions all over Canada. So when I speak to you, members of the Black Law Association of Canada and the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers, I want you to know that anti-Black racism in 2025 within the legal profession is ever present. It's ever present, it's systemic, it's institutional, it's endemic. So you have to look at courts, you have to look at tribunals, you have to look at even the Law Society, and that's what Justice Theriault said in the Morris case. Justice Theriault said in paragraph 1, writing for a 5-member panel, he says, look, anti-Black racism must be confronted, it must be acknowledged, and it must be erased. Justice Theriault also wrote in Theriault 2021 ONCA 517, and he said, look, we all have this sort of myth that Canada is better than the United States, and he said, look, we're going to debunk this myth. We're going to debunk the myth, and we're going to tell you that what is happening south of the border is also present in Canada, it's also present in Ontario. And so we have to work towards eliminating anti-Black racism. And we also have to consider anti-Black racism at every stage of proceedings. As long as there's a Black person and there's a specter of systemic or institutional racism, we have to consider it. So I hope that this quick capture of Peel Law Association versus Pieters and its impact on the legal profession is instructive and useful to you, and thank you very much.
Okay.